let me give you yet a third model. Students read their own paper in group to a group of 2 other students who give them feedback as they're going through the paper. So read your paper once through thoroughly, then read it very slowly. And periodically stop and ask, is this clear to you? Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay, would you summarize what I said in the first paragraph? If they can't summarize it, then figure out why not. Was your first paragraph not clear? And so forth. So now you have them reading their own paper, getting feedback, and sort of cultivating in the listeners certain kinds of relationships to their paper. Do you think I need an example here? Do you think I need to elaborate this further? Do you think I need to bring in another point of view? Do you think I need more information? And you can, of course, write these questions out and share them with the students so they can all have their copy of questions you can ask about your paper. Then at the end of that, you have oral feedback on your paper, and again, the assignment for the next day may be to rewrite. Now, my strategy in terms of having students write is to have them write a little bit every day. That is, I don't assign big papers typically, although I have one big paper, which I will get to, which is students assessing their work for the whole semester, where they turn in an argument for a grade. But that aside, I don't give big papers. But they have to have a paper done for every day in class, which I teach on a Tuesday, Thursday schedule, so it's 2 papers a week. The papers are only a page and a half. But the paper must be completed in order to remain in class. So my protocol is as you come in, you bring your paper up to me, and I stamp it, and you take your seat. If your paper isn't completed, you can come once without a paper, but otherwise you're not allowed in class. Now, the reason I use that strategy is that students tend to fall behind in their work. And when they fall behind in their work, then it's like they never catch up. So in this case, if they're really falling behind, they're just not in class. And it's really hard to think you're still in the class when you're not in the class. That is, there's something deceptive about being there but not being up to date. So I say your ticket to class is the completed assignment. If your paper isn't completed, then my assignment is go to the library and finish your paper and then join us. Now, if I was teaching at the high school level or the junior high school level, I just divide the class into 2 groups, the ones who finished their work, the ones who didn't. The ones who didn't finish their work, they'd have to finish their work before they could join the rest of us. But I wouldn't let them move on until they did that work. I wouldn't just keep moving on. And I find that that works very well. Again, it's a response. It's a way of exercising and holding the students responsible. You must complete your work to be in the class. And how often do I assess you? Every day. Every day you come in, it has to be ready. And I find that that works very well. So I rarely have a student who doesn't pass the course who doesn't drop it. Because usually the students say, gee, this is every single day, well, I'm going to drop it then. But the ones who stay with it, they're all going to do reasonably well because it's a practice course. Write, assess, write, assess, write, assess, write, assess, write, assess. How many papers did I carry home? None. I don't carry papers home except at the end of the semester when I get the whole portfolio. Now you say, but then how do the students know what grade they're getting? And I say, I discourage talking about grades, although I give them grading profiles. Here's what an A looks like, here's what a B looks like, here's what a C looks like, and here's what a D looks like. Now, some students, of course, are going to think, I've got to know what my grade is. Otherwise, I'll go crazy. You know, I just absolutely have to. So I say, if you have to know what your grade is, give me your portfolio at any time during the semester and say, I would like to know if this was the end of the semester and this was all that was required, what grade would I get? So I put that proviso in. Virtually no students ask for it, which tells me that the students don't want to know their grade nearly as much as they think they want to know their grade. And if, in fact, you're doing your job right, they basically know how well they're doing through the feedback system. So I find that when the feedback is working well, the students are really sort of in tune with the thing. All right, so that's another part of the system that I use. Let's, I've already mentioned a bit about listening, but let's talk, I've got other ways for assessing writing, but let's talk about getting students to assess listening. Here's one way that I use to assess listening. I have students put their name on 3x5 cards, 1 card per student, and while I'm presenting materials, I have the cards in my hand. And their responsibility, at any time that something isn't clear, they can raise their hand and get clarification. But if their hand isn't up, this means I am clear and prepared to summarize what has been said. So if you're a good listener, you can summarize what you heard. If you can't summarize, you either didn't listen well or you didn't make clear that you needed clarification. So I say to my student, it is your responsibility to seek clarification if you need it, and you'll get it. But if you don't, you're saying that I'm clear and I can summarize. So I carry these cards in my hand, and then periodically I will pull a card randomly and call upon the student to summarize a main point or to perform in whatever way is relevant given what we're doing. And I find that this really perks students up. In fact, if my cards are not in my hand and I pick them up, the whole body language of the class changes. Because it goes from I am not being held responsible to listen to I am being held responsible to listen. And as soon as people are held responsible, they perform differently. And so I say, when are you responsible to listen? Every moment in class. That's your responsibility. So now ask yourself, suppose I took somebody's card out, and now I'm going to illustrate how this goes to the micro level. So I call on somebody, what should I do with that card? Put it to the back of the pack? Just drop it in the pack and shuffle. So that's what I do. Why? Because suppose I put it to the back of the pack and it was a 32-person class. Then that person knows they're not going to be called upon till 31 other students are called upon. So I don't want that. So I don't do it that way. Now, should I call on somebody and then give them the question, or ask the question and then pull a card? Ask the question first and wait a little bit. Everyone thinks I might be that person. Then they're all rehearsing an answer, and then I pull a card. Do you see? So what I can do is get the students to listen in a disciplined way despite themselves, because they're not coming in with any background in disciplined listening. They're very poor listeners on the whole, and listening is an important role to play as a learner in at least our society and the way we basically teach. Listening is much harder to do well than writing, reading, or speaking. And yet the students are asked to do that more than any other thing, and they're very, very unskilled as listeners. They listen impressionistically. They wait for meaning to happen. They don't actively construct meaning. They wait for meaning to occur in their head. The meanings that occur to them are very random and have often no relationship to the importance of the points made. So I might talk for 10 minutes and then to say, okay, in what I said there were 3 important points. I'd like each of you to take a sheet of paper down and write down 1 point that you believe was very important. Okay? Now turn to the person next to you and share those points. Now I take out my cards and call on people. What point did you think was important, and so forth. Then I go back and I say, okay, here are the 3 points as I would say them. And that way then they process, they listen, they assess. And what do I have to grade? Nothing. What do I have to carry home? Nothing. So all of my design is work-intensive for the students, not work-intensive for the teacher. Because students need tons of practice, and you don't have time to be there observing all of their practice. And it's all in the design. You can design classes so that students are working hard almost every minute, and it's no harder. In fact, it's easier for you to do it that way because they learn better and they produce better work and so forth and so on. So these are some ways in which I help my students to listen better. But now let me say that if you want to design your class well, one of the things you have to do is to assess the strengths and weaknesses of your students in the thinking that you want, because you want to build on the thinking that they have, and you want to ameliorate their weaknesses. So you want to design structures so in thinking they work on their weaknesses. Well, I've already talked a bit about this. Here's our two weaknesses that my students have. They do only what they're required to do, and they don't do anything till they have a pressing deadline. So here is their design for most classes. Sleep, 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 cram. Sleep, 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 cram. Sleep, 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 plagiarize the hell out of it, cram a lot, take the final exam. And that's their design. No systematic practice, no discipline, ineffective studying, ineffective learning. So because of that, I have a pressing deadline due every day. And I check it every day. And this at least introduces them to the notion of regular discipline, regular performance. No paper, no entrance. Go to the library. Now, on rare occasions, I've had a student who said, I paid for your instruction. And I say, listen well to my instruction. Go to the library. Finish your paper. Come back when it's finished. And by the way, I've checked with the university lawyers, perfectly legal. All students do not have to be in the same place at the same time. In order, what you need is an explanation that is legitimate for differentiating what students are doing in keeping with the course. So by having different students go to different places, some go to the library, finish their work, perfectly reasonable. They have no right to be just where they want to be because they think that's what's going to be the place they're going to learn the most. You make that decision, you're the professional. So there's no problem in that from a legal point of view.